You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of like absolute precision. It is a lot like engineering in a way.
Right, yeah. Like, it is very cut and dry.
Yeah, totally cut and dry. Like if you fall and you break your arm, you go to the hospital, right? They take an x-ray.
And you just see it.
You just see it. It shows that unmistakable, jagged white line across the bone. The doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is. That is the break.
Yeah, the diagnosis is totally binary. I mean, the bone is either broken or it's not broken. There are clean lines.
Right.
There is really no room for debate about what you were looking at on that screen.
And honestly, it is comforting. We like things to be visible. We like things to be categorized neatly in a box with a really clear label.
It makes us feel in control,
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But then you step into the world of human morality and suddenly that x-ray machine just seems completely broken.
Yeah, it gets really fuzzy.
Very fuzzy. We look at the landscape of human ethics and it's incredibly murky. We constantly swing between these two massive extremes.
Oh, for sure.
On one side, we have this modern cultural assumption that genuine affection means, well, basically removing all boundaries.
Right. The idea that if you love someone, you just validate everything they want, no matter what.
Yeah, you just give them a blank check. But then on the other side, we have these cold, rigid rules. That is where morality turns into like a ladder for self-righteousness.
Where people just use rules to judge everyone else around them.
Spot on. So welcome to Reformed thinking. Today we are looking at two theological essays that attempt to basically fix that broken moral x-ray machine.
And they do it by analyzing a single ancient sentence, which is Romans 13.9.
Right. What really stands out in this research is how that one sentence just totally rejects both of those extremes we just mentioned.
It completely shuts them down. Our mission today is to investigate how the Apostle Paul dismantles this whole assumption that strict rules and genuine affection are opposites.
Because we always treat them like opposites today.
We do. But the essays we are analyzing argue that, according to Paul, sincere love for one's neighbor is actually the comprehensive moral principle expressed in the Ten Commandments.
I really want to set the stakes for this conversation for you, the listener. Because society today basically says love approves whatever a person desires.
Yeah, the cultural narrative is that if you love someone, you affirm their choices.
Right, no matter what those choices are. But on the flip side, we have all seen cold legalism.
Oh, absolutely.
We have seen rules weaponized against people. So we are going to analyze how this text cuts through both of those errors, offering a radically different view of what it means to be a good neighbor.
But to grasp why Paul wrote this specific sentence, we really need to look at the volatile world his original audience lived in first.
Yeah, we have to set the historical matrix. We cannot just read this in a vacuum.
Right. So we are looking at the middle of the first century. Paul writes the epistle to the Romans around AD 57.
And he is writing from the city of Corinth, right?
Yes, from Corinth. And this is during the early reign of the Roman Emperor Nero.
Oh, wow. So Nero. That is a name that carries a really heavy, ominous weight.
I mean, even people who do not study ancient history know that name. He is synonymous with tyranny, excess, just total chaos.
Yeah, the guy's a monster.
He was. And the church in Rome during his reign was a highly combustible mix of people.
How so? Like, what was the demographic?
Well, a few years prior to Paul writing this letter, the previous emperor, Claudius, had expelled the entire Jewish population from Rome.
Wait, all of them?
All of them. The Roman historian Suetonius actually records this. He notes that the expulsion happened because of constant riots instigated by someone named Chrestus.
Chrestus. That sounds like a Roman misunderstanding of the name Christ.
That is what most historians agree on, yeah. It was probably disputes within the Jewish community about Jesus being the Christ.
Okay, so the Jewish believers were literally kicked out of their own homes.
Exactly. Or, rather, that is right, they had to leave everything. But eventually, Claudius dies.
And when the emperor dies, the edict expires.
Right. The edict expires and the Jewish believers start returning to the capital city.
But when they come back, things have changed entirely. I mean, they're not returning to the exact same community they left, are they?
Not at all. The landscape of the church had shifted completely.
Because the Gentiles had been running things while they were gone.
Right. When the Jewish believers left Rome, they took their cultural customs, their synagogue traditions, their strict dietary laws. They took all of that with them.
So in their absence, the Gentile believers just took the reins of the house churches.
And remember who these Gentiles were. These are people who had just emerged from pagan idolatry.
Right, from the wild Roman culture.
So now the Jewish believers return, and you have this severe tension. You have Jewish Christians shaped by strict adherence to ancient customs.
Sitting right next to Gentile Christians who have just walked away from a lifestyle of total Roman self-indulgence.
It is a powder keg.
So imagine you are trying to build a unified community today, for our listeners thinking about this. Imagine trying to do this in a massive, cutthroat metropolis.
It would be nearly impossible.
Half your group relies on ancient, strict cultural customs. They have rules for everything, right?
Yeah.
What they eat, what days they rest, how they wash their hands.
And the other half just left a lifestyle where literally anything goes. A culture completely saturated with self-gratification.
And you are trying to get them to share a meal, let alone share a unified spiritual life.
Honestly, if I am looking at that situation, my first thought is, why wouldn't Paul just tell them to retreat?
Like, just run away.
Yeah, why not just separate from this chaotic society and build a compound somewhere out in the hills? Or conversely, why not overthrow the corrupt government? I mean, Rome was brutal and Nero was a tyrant.
Well, the essays we were reviewing rule out both isolation and rebellion.
Okay, so no running and no fighting.
Right. Paul demands that they live out their heavenly citizenship right in the middle of a pagan empire.
That is a tough assignment. It really is. He does not give them the option to run away to the desert, and he definitely does not give them permission to pick up swords and start a revolution.
So where does the moral law fit into this?
The moral law was not some theoretical philosophy discussed in quiet academic halls. It was a highly practical tool.
To keep them grounded?
Yes. It was meant to keep the church from assimilating into Nero's corrupt culture, while also keeping them from falling into political insurrection.
And we really have to remember what Rome looked like on the ground, just on a daily basis.
It was harsh.
Rome was characterized by massive class divides. You had masters and servants sitting in the exact same house church.
Yeah, just think about that dynamic for a second.
It is wild. You had rich patrons who essentially bought loyalty, sitting next to daily laborers who barely had enough to eat.
And you had Roman citizens with legal rights and protections sitting next to immigrants who had absolutely none.
It was a wildly unequal society.
And the city itself was built on institutionalized sexual immorality, rampant idolatry, and violent political volatility.
So the social world of Rome made the command to love your neighbor incredibly demanding.
Oh, completely. These believers did not meet in a vacuum. They brought all the habits, the fears, the suspicions, and the ambitions of a highly unequal society right into their fellowship.
So Paul knows he is writing to a community that could explode at any minute. I mean, if someone looks at a fellow church member as an inferior because of their social rank, that destroys the community.
Or if a Gentile believer brings the sexual ethics of the Roman baths into the church, it destroys the community.
Which is why the moral law had to be clearly established.
Exactly. I mean, things like adultery, violence, fraud, and false accusation, these were not abstract possibilities for these people.
They were everyday realities in Rome, just walking down the street.
Right. These behaviors were capable of ruining households and fracturing congregations. Paul had to give them a concrete standard to hold on to.
But if Paul is demanding they hold on to this moral law in the middle of Nero's Rome, how does he actually enforce it without sounding like just another Roman tyrant?
That is the genius of his letter. He could not just hand out practical advice in a vacuum.
He could not just say, hey, everyone, play nice.
No, he had to build a massive theological argument first. And this brings us to the structural progression of the text.
Moving from doctrine to duty.
Right. The architecture of the book of Romans is a masterpiece of logical progression. Paul spends the first 11 chapters laying out systematic theology.
11 chapters. That is a lot of groundwork.
It is. He systematically proves universal human guilt, showing that both Jew and Gentile are entirely sinful before God.
So he levels the playing field right away. Nobody has the high ground.
Spot on. Then he establishes the doctrine of justification by faith alone. He unpacks the sovereign purposes of God in history. He builds this massive, indestructible foundation before he even asks them to do a single thing.
It is really heavy lifting. And, you know, modern people, we often want the life hacks without the background theory.
Oh, we just want the summary.
Yeah, we want the 10 steps to a better life, the quick fix.
Yeah.
But Paul spends 11 chapters on pure theology.
And then we hit chapter 12. Chapter 12 marks a hard pivot with one specific word.
Let me guess. Therefore.
You got it. Therefore, he writes, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God.
Okay, so that word signals the transition from doctrine to Christian ethics.
Yes. Christian obedience is framed as the response of those who have received mercy.
Ah,
It is not the currency used to purchase mercy.
it has a huge distinction.
It changes everything about how you view obedience.
Which brings us to chapter 13.
Hmm?
So he moves from civil duties, like submitting to the government and paying your taxes, to social duties.
Right, he starts talking about the debt of love we owe to all people.
Now, if I'm a listener who just heard that I am saved entirely by grace, like my slate is wiped clean, my natural instinct is to think I'm off the hook.
Sure.
I might ask, why bring up the Ten Commandments at all? Doesn't grace just cancel the law?
That is the natural human assumption. If the debt is paid, why do the rules still matter? But we have to understand the difference between the Old Covenant state of Israel and the New Covenant church.
Okay, break that down for us.
Under the Old Covenant, the moral law was packaged with ceremonial systems of sacrifice and civil laws designed specifically for the theocratic state of ancient Israel.
So you're talking about the dietary restrictions, the temple sacrifices, the civic punishments for crimes, all that stuff.
Yes, all of that. But with the coming of the New Covenant, the ceremonial shadows expired because they were fulfilled in Christ.
So no more animal sacrifices.
Right. And the civil codes of the Israelite state also vanished because the church is not a geopolitical nation.
It is a global community now.
Exactly. But the moral law, which is codified in the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments that remains,
Why does that part stay while the others go?
because it is a perpetual standard of righteousness. It reveals God's holy, unchanging character. God does not change, so his moral standard does not change.
Okay, so grace does not nullify the moral law.
No, rather, it establishes the law as the thankful rule of life for the redeemed.
Wait, hold on. That sounds contradictory on the surface. If I am completely forgiven by grace, why would I willingly put myself back under a set of rules?
Because they are not rules for salvation anymore.
Ah, okay. So the law stops being a judge that condemns you, and it becomes a guide that directs your gratitude.
Yes, the believers are not justified by keeping the law. They are justified freely by grace. But because they have received that grace, they are now directed by the moral law in how to live out their gratitude.
It shows them how to say thank you.
Precisely. The law shows them what pleases the God who saved them.
Okay, so having established that the moral law still applies, let's look at the precise wording Paul uses to enforce it, the syntax of holiness. We are breaking down the Greek.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
Paul lists 4 specific prohibitions from the second table of the Ten Commandments. He writes, "You shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet."
Now, I know the Greek structure here is very specific, but let's try not to get too bogged down in grammar.
Yeah, keep it accessible. What is actually happening with the language there?
Well, the Greek structure uses the negative particle out combined with a future indicative active verb.
Okay, and what does that actually mean for the reader?
What this creates is an absolute, unyielding prohibition. It translates the Hebrew idiom of absolute command. It is not just a suggestion.
Right.
It is not a prediction of future behavior like, you probably won't steal. It carries the heaviest prohibitive force possible in the language. It binds the conscience for all time.
So it's not saying, hey, try to avoid stealing if you can.
Yeah.
It is an immovable wall. You shall not steal. Period.
That is right. It is a hard boundary. And after listing those 4 specific commands, Paul adds a phrase that acts like a dragnet.
A dragnet, what is the phrase?
He says, and if there be any other commandment.
Oh, I see, so it catches everything else.
Exactly. This phrase assumes other commands exist and brings them all under the exact same standard. It is a rhetorical device that ensures no moral loophole is left open.
So you cannot say, well, I did not murder or steal, so my behavior is fine, if you are simultaneously violating another command governing human relationships, like, say, bearing false witness.
Right. It captures everything. No loopholes.
But then we hit the main assertion of the text. Paul says all these commands are summarized or briefly comprehended in one saying, you shall love your neighbor as yourself.
And the Greek verb used here is anakephileotai.
Okay, that is quite a mouthful. Anakephileotai. What does it actually mean in context?
It literally means to bring matters together under a head or to recapitulate.
Okay, but how was that word used back then?
This specific word was used in classical Greco-Roman literature by rhetoricians like Quintilian and Aristotle.
Oh, so it is a persuasive term.
Very much so. They use it to describe a very specific moment in a courtroom trial. Imagine a defense attorney who has spent hours, maybe days, making diverse, complex arguments.
Laying out all the evidence.
Right. At the very end of the trial, he gathers all those distinct points and compresses them into one powerful, unified summary for the jury to grasp at a single glance.
Wow, that is a great image. But I hear that courtroom analogy, and it helps define the word. But I have to push back a little on how we use the concept of a summary today.
How so?
Well, if you think about a summary today, it usually means leaving things out. Like if you read the summary of a book, you skip the details, you do not read the whole plot.
You just get the cliff notes.
Yeah. So does this mean love replaces the specific rules? Are we just throwing the 10 Commandments away and replacing them with the general vibe of love?
That is a really common misunderstanding, but the authors of the essays explicitly correct this notion.
Okay, so what is the correction?
The verb anakephallotai does not mean the individual commands are dissolved, canceled, or thrown into a pile. A summary, in this classical sense, preserves the substance of what it gathers.
So they don't lose their shape.
Right. The individual commands preserve their distinct identity, but they are united under a single headship. Love and law interpret one another.
I like to think of the moral law like the banks of a river, and love is the water.
Oh, that is a good analogy.
Yeah, because without the water, the banks are just a dry, lifeless ditch.
That is legalism, right?
Just dirt and rocks, no
Okay.
life.
But without the banks, the water floods everywhere and destroys the town. That is sentimentalism. The banks give the water direction and purpose.
That is brilliant. Love tells the law what its motivation should be, and the law tells love what its boundaries are.
I agree completely. If you just have the commands without love, you have mechanical compliance.
You are just a robot following code.
But if you just have the concept of love without the commands, you have subjective chaos.
Yes, because human beings are very, very good at baptizing their own selfish interests and calling it compassion.
We do that all the time. We justify everything based on how we feel. And that brings us to the false dichotomy. Because the Greek text proves that love and law are permanently linked, we really have to confront how wildly our modern culture misunderstands this relationship.
We are looking at law versus sentimentalism.
Right. The research points out that Romans 13.9 exposes the tension between two massive errors that still plague us today: legalism and antinomianism.
Antinomianism literally meaning anti-law or lawlessness.
Yes. Let's examine legalism first.
Okay.
Legalism attempts to use outward compliance with the law as a ladder to earn God's favor. It focuses entirely on external behavior, completely missing the heart of love.
So it is all about looking good on the outside.
Completely. A legalist might never physically steal, but they will ruthlessly exploit someone in a business deal and feel totally justified because technically they did not break a civil statute.
It is morality without a pulse.
It is dead. On the completely opposite end of the spectrum is antinomianism. This error uses the language of grace to excuse sin.
Oh man, this is everywhere today.
It really is. It claims that moral boundaries actually restrict authentic life.
If we break down the modern definition of love, society largely defines love as therapeutic self-affirmation.
Yes, therapeutic is the exact right word for it.
The prevailing thought is that private desire is harmless. Whatever you want to do is fine, as long as there is no outward, visible, physical injury to someone else. Love is just a vague warmth.
But that definition creates a counterfeit reality. Sentimentalism uses the language of love while totally discarding the standards of God.
And love without boundaries is an illusion.
It is a destructive illusion.
So let me pose a direct challenge for you, the listener, to consider right now. Can you claim to love your spouse while entertaining adulterous desires in your mind?
Or can a church speak warmly about community and fellowship while turning a blind eye to exploitation or slander within its ranks?
You just can't.
True love takes moral shape. It is seen not just in what we do, but in what we refuse to do.
The negative commands, the you shall nots, are not narrow restrictions meant to ruin human flourishing.
No, they establish protective boundaries around goods given by God.
Like, you shall not murder protects life,
You shall not steal protects stewardship.
and you shall not covet protects contentment.
Exactly. If we look at the bigger picture, adultery destroys households. Theft seizes what was entrusted to another. Coveting deeply resents the providence of God.
So they all have huge consequences.
Therefore, love is a disposition that actively seeks the neighbor's true good by respecting those protective boundaries. To cross those boundaries is, by definition, to commit an act of hatred against your neighbor, regardless of how you feel about them emotionally.
Okay, we understand the objective boundaries of love conceptually.
Hmm.
That makes sense. But how do these ancient commands apply to the daily lives of people living in the modern world?
Let's bring this down to earth and look at the application.
Yeah, because we are not living in ancient Rome.
The essays provide a highly detailed application for today. Let's start with the command against adultery. We tend to think of this strictly as a physical act of betrayal,
Right.
but the biblical ethic extends far beyond the physical act.
Because Jesus said that looking with lust is adultery of the heart.
Yes. Which means this command directly confronts our digital habits today.
Oh, that is a huge one.
It includes pornography, emotional infidelity, flirtation outside of marriage, and secret fantasies.
So it's way more than just the physical affair.
Absolutely. These things violate neighbor love because they consume people as objects rather than loving them as neighbors. They weaken covenant devotion.
And the psychological mechanism of pornography relies entirely on objectification.
It does. When someone views pornography, they are participating in the degradation of another human being for selfish gratification.
It trains the mind to view others as commodities to be consumed rather than image bearers to be respected.
It is the absolute antithesis of love.
It takes something meant for covenant faithfulness and just turns it into consumerism.
That is a great way to put it.
What about murder? Obviously, most people listening to this discussion are not out there committing homicide.
Right, but the command extends beyond homicide. The authors link murder to destroying reputations through slander.
Gossip.
Yes, it includes cherishing secret anger and holding on to bitterness. It includes the kind of biting sarcasm that hides genuine malice.
They also mention the dehumanization common in modern political zeal, which I found fascinating.
Oh, it is so relevant right now.
We've seen this across the entire political spectrum, left and right. People use political ideology to justify speaking about their opponents, not as human beings made in the image of God, but as absolute monsters.
And the algorithms on social media actually feed on this outrage.
They reward us for assassinating someone's character.
Mhm.
People feel morally justified doing it because they believe their cause is righteous.
But that is a clear violation of the command against murder. The Apostle John writes in his epistle that whoever hates his brother is a murderer.
So love opposes the inward hostility and the dehumanizing speech from which physical violence eventually grows.
Right. Love seeks the preservation and welfare of the neighbor, even the political opponent.
Okay, so what does theft look like today beyond just, shoplifting from a grocery store?
Theft includes anything where one enriches oneself at another's expense through dishonest means. The texts list dishonest work hours, like claiming you were working when you're actually just messing around online.
Time theft.
Yeah, time theft. It also includes employers withholding fair wages from their employees.
Wage theft.
It also includes students using plagiarism. Taking someone else's intellectual property and claiming it as your own is stealing their labor.
Wow, so cheating on a paper is a violation of the Eighth Commandment.
It is. It includes financial opacity within institutions or businesses, too, where numbers are manipulated to hide the truth from investors or partners.
Cooking the books.
Exactly. The mechanism here is taking what God has entrusted to someone else. Love does not merely keep its hands out of someone else's pockets. It becomes industrious and generous.
So the opposite of a thief is not just someone who stopped stealing.
No, it is someone who works honestly so they have something to share with someone in need.
And then we get to coveting. This is the command that really gets under the skin, especially today.
Coveting is arguably the most searing command for the digital age because it targets internal desire.
It is all internal.
It is the only command in the second table of the Decalogue that deals exclusively with the invisible state of the heart. You could externally avoid adultery, murder, and theft and look completely respectable to society while inwardly violating this command every single day.
Social media algorithms breed envy by design. We sit there scrolling through pictures of another person's perfectly renovated house, their flawless vacation, their successful career opportunities.
And we feel that knot in our stomach.
Yeah, that pit of jealousy.
Covetousness compares your situation with their visible advantages, and it fundamentally charges God with unfairness.
Wow. So you were basically putting God on trial.
You are. It is a deep resentment of God's providence. You are essentially saying, God, you gave them what belongs to me.
That is heavy.
And the mechanism of envy destroys community because instead of rejoicing in your neighbor's blessing, you are grieved by it. You view their success as your personal loss.
Okay, so we have these 4 massive prohibitions, and they are all summed up in Leviticus 19.1.
Right.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
Now, I have to ask about that phrase, as yourself. In modern psychology, this often gets flipped into a self-esteem mandate. People say you cannot love anyone else until you learn to love yourself.
We hear that all the time.
Is Paul advocating for a modern self-esteem program before we can help others?
It is a really common misinterpretation, but no. The text assumes ordinary human self-preservation. It is not commanding narcissism, and it is not telling you to cultivate a high view of yourself as a prerequisite for obedience.
So how should we understand it?
Think about it like this. It takes the natural, hardwired instinct we all have to feed ourselves when we are hungry, to clothe ourselves when we are cold, and to protect ourselves from danger.
Just basic survival instincts.
Right. It takes that intense natural self-concern, and it demands that we apply that exact same intensity to securing the welfare of the people placed in our immediate vicinity.
That is highly convicting. When I am hungry, I do not just sit there and think good thoughts about food. I get up and go to the fridge. I take action.
You solve the problem.
So to love my neighbor as myself means if I see they are in need, I take action with that same urgency.
Yes, it concerns the manner and intensity of our love, directing our natural self-preservation outward toward the good of others.
Well, if the standard for loving our neighbor is this strict, this internal, and this demanding, every single human being falls entirely short. We have all failed.
Utterly.
We must now address how anyone can actually fulfill this law, which brings us to the Christological reality.
Romans 13.9 cannot be understood simply as a moral improvement program.
Like a self-help book.
If you read this and just think, I need to try harder to be a better person, you have missed the point entirely. The law exposes the sinner before it guides the saint.
It shows us the disease before it offers the cure.
It reveals a standard that no fallen child of Adam has ever met. But it points to the only human being who fulfilled this law flawlessly. Jesus Christ. We really have to look at his obedience in two categories.
Okay, what are they?
His active obedience and his passive obedience.
Let's unpack active obedience first. What does that mean?
From his infancy to his death, Christ kept the moral law perfectly in thought, word, and deed.
So he never slipped up once?
Not once. He never committed adultery, not in act, not in imagination, not in desire. He never murdered. Instead, he preserved life and healed the afflicted. He never stole or defrauded anyone for selfish advantage.
He never coveted the possessions, honor, or position of another either.
Right. He perfectly loved his neighbor, spending himself for those who could not repay him. His active obedience was a flawless, lifelong fulfillment of the moral law.
He did what we're supposed to do, but failed to do. He provides the perfect record.
Yes. And then we have his passive obedience.
Passive obedience, what is that referring to?
This refers to his submission to the penalty of the law on the cross.
Okay, so active is his life, passive is his death.
Exactly. On the cross, Christ acted as the federal substitute for his people. He bore the full curse and wrath due to lawbreakers.
He took the penalty for the adulterers, the murderers, the thieves, and the coveters.
He satisfied the justice of God so that God remains just while justifying the ungodly who trust in Christ.
Now, I have to ask a theological question on behalf of the listener because this comes up a lot.
Sure, go ahead.
If Christ lived the perfect life for me and he paid the penalty for my law breaking on the cross, the debt is paid. Why do we still have to obey it? Is not the whole thing finished?
This brings us to a crucial concept known as the third use of the law, or the usus normativus. The Reformers understood three uses for the moral law.
Okay, let's hear them.
The first use is civil, to restrain evil in society through fear of punishment, like police and courts.
To keep order.
Right. The second use is pedagogical, to act as a mirror, exposing our sin and driving us to Christ for salvation.
Showing us we need a savior.
Yes. But the third use applies exclusively to the believer who is already justified.
So this is for the person who is already saved, not the person trying to get saved.
Believers do not keep the law to earn salvation. They are justified through faith alone in Christ's finished work. However, the risen Christ grants the Holy Spirit to his people, and the Spirit writes the moral law upon the believer's heart.
So the motivation completely changes.
Yes, we are saved by grace, and that grace produces a genuine desire to obey. Christian love and obedience to the law is the fruit of grace, not the root of justification.
I want to make sure I'm following this. It's the evidence of the new life, not the payment for it. We do not keep the law to get saved. We keep the law because we are saved, and the Spirit enables us to walk in paths of righteousness.
Spot on. The law shows the believer how to please the Father. It is a family code now, rather than a condemnation.
To synthesize everything we have covered today, Romans 13.9 proves that love and law are not enemies. They are intimately, permanently connected.
They absolutely are.
The Ten Commandments provide the objective shape of love. They guard us against cold, lifeless legalism by demanding our hearts, and they guard us against boundaryless, toxic sentimentalism by setting concrete moral limits.
And while the law exposes our absolute failure, Christ's grace provides both the pardon for our sin and the power to begin practicing genuine love.
Before we close, there is a final provocative thought drawn from the essays regarding this concept of debt mentioned just before verse 9.
Yeah, think about civil taxes. You can pay your taxes to the government, zero out your balance, and owe the state nothing until next year.
You get a clean slate. You get a receipt that says paid in full.
But the debt of love is permanent. Because God's moral will continually governs our relationships, there will never be a moment in your earthly life where you can sit back, look at your spouse, your children, your coworkers, or your community and say, I have loved enough, I owe my neighbor nothing more.
You can never check it off the list. It is never finished.
It is a continuous, daily obligation that stretches all the way until the day Christ returns. It is a debt we joyfully owe, constantly pay, and yet never fully satisfy.
That brings us right back to our opening thought. The diagnostic landscape of human morality is not murky when we look at it through the lens of Scripture.
The X-ray machine works perfectly.
It really does. God's law provides the sharp, clean lines of what love actually looks like in practice, cutting through our subjective feelings and cultural noise. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive on Reformed thinking. As you go about your week, we encourage you to examine your own definition of love. Does it look like the vague, boundaryless sentiment of our culture, or does it match the concrete, protective boundaries of the text? Keep seeking truth, keep asking questions, and we will see you next time.